is activating the appeal division itself alone is not enough reform, rather than all this reform they are trying to suggest. Because, like I sided with people that said they should defeat this bill, but I need something in return. Why I sided is because of my experience with the C-50 now, that you apply for an application, especially under the skilled worker category now, that because a transcript was delayed, they've taken a decision and the next day the transcript was sent to the officer. Because of C-50, that they are not refusing you, they are only rejecting the application. So you can't go to federal court. So the only thing is, the officer said, resubmit another application, despite the fact that you have what they're looking for and it was late for 1 day. So which is what Francisco was talking about, accountability. So I think we should consider all that. We criticize to defeat, but there should be a reasonable alternative to suggest. Thank you.
There's a clear alternative. Hire more staff to clear the backlog. Make sure there's a appeal division. Make the appointment of board members non-political. Not very difficult to do.
I think as advocates and people who have clients with strong agency factors, we should be advocating for the full range of agency considerations to be before the IRB. Practically speaking, how likely is that to happen? That's a separate question. There are obviously going to be complications about, issues around pull factors and so on, how many people will ask to appear before the IRB. And those are difficult questions that need to be worked out. I don't have a quick answer. I think in principle, though, there's no reason why the full range of considerations should be considered by the IRB. If establishment isn't going to be there, then I would say we obviously can't get rid of a separate agency application to immigration, at least on the establishment considerations. I think we can't knock that out completely.
Next.
My name is Catherine Bruce and I'm a refugee lawyer. And I wanted to raise an issue that I don't think...
Please use the microphone.
I wanted to raise an issue that I don't think has been adequately or really addressed at the moment. And I'm starting off by saying that I'm no supporter of the bill. And I'm picking up on a comment that was made earlier about costs and how this is being sold as refugees cost us too much. And also picking up on the notion of things are being hidden. So the first thing I want to point out is that, for those of you who don't know, most refugees are legally aided. And in my opinion, this is not, in the long run, going to save money, and this might be a good point to hammer in at the government. The reason why it won't save money is now what you've got is a two-stage process. At the moment, we have one hearing, which counsel is paid for to go and represent a client. Now we're going to have two hearings. We're going to have a hearing at day 8 and a hearing at, let's say, day whatever it was, day 60. So now legal aid has got to fund us for 2 hearings. So the question I would like to see put up front to the Minister is this. Has he factored in the cost of this? Is he planning an increase to legal aid? If he has factored in the costs, why aren't we hearing about that? And if he hasn't factored in the costs, which of course he hasn't, is this in fact a backdrop to actually decimating the right to counsel for refugee claimants? Because this is what we see is going to happen, and this is what I suspect is partially behind this, because if you have a first stage process within 8 days, you are not going to have the time to get counsel there, and if you do not have counsel, there is a fundamental abrogation of refugees' rights. So either there's a cost, and we're not hearing about it, or there's a decimation of the right to counsel. Minister, which is it?
Well, the legal aid system in Ontario is in crisis. Everybody knows that. We don't know for how long this situation is going to continue. The majority of the provinces of Canada don't have legal aid for refugees. So he is counting on that the refugee is not going to have a legal representation at the first hearing at least. And will be very difficult to obtain a legal aid certificate for the second hearing because the crisis. If they are let me put an example. If a person appears in Thunder Bay and receive a notice to appear in Toronto 8 days after to be presented at the IRB, Who is going to cover that? So legal aid is a dream. The real issue is who is going to cover the cost of refugees, to mobilize, to go to hearings, and for how long it's going to be and whatever. In my opinion, he is counting on that the refugee will be without legal representation.
He said that to me Tuesday.
So Olivia said that he said it to her.
Tuesday, I asked that question. That's what he answered. Read the transcript. I'm serious. You want me to say that? Yeah. I asked precisely that question. 8 days you can't get legal aid. What's going to happen? And if you read the transcript of the Immigration Committee, it's online. And he said, well, you know, right now CBSA you don't get a counsel anyway.
Wow. So Francisco is absolutely right. He's counting on that.
That's right.
Next microphone.
Immigrants, and you know, all of us here in the room are somehow cheating the system. But I think if you look at the reality of the immigration system, as Francisco mentioned, if you're poor, if you're a person of color, if you're coming from a lot of countries in the world, they're saying that people are coming here, the refugee system, to jump the queue. But the fact is that there is no queue for people, for huge numbers of people to ever get into this country. So, I mean, we could talk about examples of, the Mexican woman that was deported and killed, and the Eritrean refugee who killed himself because he didn't want to be deported back to torture, or even the 4 workers who died on Christmas Eve, who had no status and weren't able to demand their rights to refuse unsafe work. But I think a lot of us know all this, but just to let you folks know here in this room, and some of you were there, that just on this past Saturday, on May Day, thousands of people, over 2,000 people marched in the streets demanding that Jason Kenney be fired for the human rights abuses that he's perpetrating on this country. Personally, I know, and I'm sure many people in this room know people that have been deported back to horrible situations of violence and torture. And it's really heartening to see so many people here today out against this bill. And I think we can take some inspiration from what we see is happening in the States, where hundreds of thousands of people are mobilizing against horrible anti-immigrant legislation they have there. So just like to echo some of the comments made and say, everyone who's in this room, let's have a meeting, let's get together, let's talk about how we can build on the demonstration last Saturday, how we can build on all the people here today to actually mobilize and stop this bill before it gets passed. So, thank you.